Hey guys, tonight we're heading into the dusty, dim-lit world of Wild West saloons. Not for a shootout or a poker game, but for something far more dangerous: dinner. You trudge through swinging doors, boots caked in trail dust, and the first thing that hits you isn't the sound of a piano or the clink of whiskey glasses, it's the smell. A thick, greasy cloud of meat, smoke, and something vaguely sweet hangs in the air like a challenge. You squint through the haze and spot a pot bubbling over a fire, a plate of beans slapped down on a counter, and a man chewing on something that might have once been bread. Welcome to the frontier's version of fine dining. You probably won't survive this meal with your dignity intact. Between the questionable meat and the coffee that doubles as paint thinner, your taste buds are in for a bumpy ride. But don't worry, we're here to explore, not to eat. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step deeper into the saloon, boots echoing on warped floorboards. The place is alive with noise, laughter, curses, the occasional thud of a fist meeting a jaw. But beneath it all, there's a rhythm to the chaos. Men and women gather around tables, hunched over plates of food that look more like survival rations than meals. You slide into a seat and someone slaps down a tin plate in front of you. It's warm, it's brown, and it smells like beans. Welcome to dinner. Most saloon meals weren't cooked by chefs. They were thrown together by whoever could keep a fire going and had access to a pot. The food was simple, hearty, and designed to keep you alive, not impress your palate. Beans were the backbone of the frontier diet, often stewed for hours with bits of salt pork or bacon. They were cheap, filling, and easy to store. You dig in, and the texture is somewhere between mush and grit. Not bad, not good, just food. Historians still argue whether saloon fare was ever meant to be enjoyed. Some say it was purely functional, a way to keep cowboys sober enough to ride home. Others believe certain saloons took pride in their cooking, offering regional specialties or imported luxuries to lure in wealthier clientele. But tonight, your plate is pure frontier. Beans, a hunk of bread, and a cup of something that might be coffee. The bread is hardtack, flour, water, and salt baked into a brick. You bite down and immediately regret it. It's dry, crumbly, and tastes like regret. Still, it was a staple. Soldiers, cowboys, and miners all relied on hardtack to fill the gaps between real meals. Some softened it in coffee, others soaked it in stew. You try both, and neither helps. The man next to you is chewing on a strip of jerky, his teeth working like a saw. Jerky was another frontier favorite, dried meat that could last for weeks without spoiling. Beef, bison, venison, even horse if things got desperate. It was salty, tough, and packed with protein. You ask him what kind it is, and he shrugs. Could be squirrel, he says. You nod politely and pretend to chew.
Quirky fact: some saloons offered mock turtle soup, which had no turtle and plenty of calf's head. It was a Victorian delicacy that somehow made its way west, probably through traveling cooks or ambitious barkeeps. You won't find it on your plate tonight, but the idea of it lingers. Proof that even in the wildest corners of America, people still craved a taste of sophistication. You glance around the room and notice a chalkboard menu nailed to the wall. It lists beans and bacon, 10 cents, stew, 15 cents, And whiskey, market price. No descriptions, no flair. Just food and drink, priced for survival. You wonder what the stew contains, but decide not to ask. The cook emerges from the back, wiping his hands on a stained apron. He's got a face like a shovel and a voice like gravel. You want seconds? He growls. You shake your head. One helping is enough. He nods and disappears again, probably to stir the pot or chase off a rat. Outside, the wind howls through the street, kicking up dust and tumbleweeds. Inside, the saloon is warm, noisy, and full of life. You sip your coffee, strong, bitter, and slightly metallic. It's boiled over an open flame, thick enough to stand a spoon in. Some say it was brewed with eggshells to cut the bitterness. Others claim it was just burnt on purpose. Either way, it wakes you up. As the night wears on, the crowd thins. A few men stumble out into the dark, bellies full and heads spinning. You stay seated, watching the fire flicker and the stew bubble. It's not gourmet, but it's real. It's the taste of survival, of grit, of a country still figuring itself out, one bite at a time. And just as you're about to stand, someone slaps a plate of bacon down in front of you. Thick, greasy, and sizzling. It smells amazing. You take a bite, and for a moment, everything else fades. The noise, the dust, and the questionable coffee. Just bacon. Glorious, salty bacon.
You lean back in your creaky chair, belly half full of beans and bacon, and watch as another plate slides across the counter. This one's got biscuits, golden, flaky, and surprisingly soft for something made in a saloon kitchen. You pick one up, steam still rising from its split center, and take a bite. It's buttery, salty, and just a little gritty, like the cook used flour that had seen better days. But it's good, really good. You glance around to see if anyone else is having the same reaction, but most folks are too busy dunking theirs in gravy or slathering on molasses. Biscuits were a staple in Wild West saloons, especially in the morning hours when cowboys stumbled in after a long night of cards and questionable decisions. They were quick to make, didn't require yeast, and could be cooked in cast iron over open flame. Some cooks added lard, others used bacon grease. You're pretty sure this one's got both. It tastes like a heart attack wrapped in a hug. The bacon on your plate is thick-cut, crisp at the edges and glistening with fat. It's not the paper-thin stuff you find in grocery stores today. This is frontier bacon, cured with salt and smoke, then fried in its own grease. You chew slowly, savoring the crunch and the salt. It's the kind of food that makes you feel invincible, even if your arteries are waving a white flag. Historians still argue whether bacon was more common than salt pork in saloons. Salt pork was cheaper, easier to store, and didn't require refrigeration, but bacon had prestige. It was the kind of meat you served when you wanted to impress, or when you had a shipment come in from back east. Either way, it was a breakfast hero. You sip your coffee again, now cooled to a drinkable temperature. It pairs oddly well with the biscuit, like a frontier version of a cafe breakfast. Someone nearby is spooning gravy over their plate, thick and peppery with bits of meat floating like survivors in a storm. You ask what's in it, and they shrug. "Whatever didn't make it into the stew," they say. You nod. That tracks. Quirky fact. Some saloons served air pie, a joke dish that came with an empty plate and a bill. It was a way to mock customers who couldn't pay or to haze newcomers. You imagine ordering one and pretending to chew just to fit in. The cook probably wouldn't laugh.
The biscuits keep coming, stacked high in a tin bowl. You grab another, this one slightly burnt on the bottom. It adds character. You tear it open and find a pocket of steam, like a tiny sauna for your fingers. You smear on some apple butter from a communal jar, and suddenly you're eating like royalty. Sweet, spiced, and just a little tangy. It cuts through the salt and smoke like a whisper. You glance at the cook again, now elbow deep in flour. He's working fast, slapping dough onto a wooden board and cutting rounds with a tin can. No measuring cups, no timers, just instinct and repetition. You wonder how many biscuits he's made in his life. Thousands? Tens of thousands? Each one a little different, each one a little the same. The man next to you is telling a story about a saloon in Tombstone that served biscuits the size of wagon wheels. You raise an eyebrow, and he grins. Okay, maybe not that big, he admits, but they were huge. Had to eat them with both hands. You laugh, imagining a cowboy wrestling a biscuit like it's a wild animal. You reach for your third biscuit, this one topped with a slice of cheddar. Cheese wasn't common in saloons, but when it showed up, it was a treat. Usually hard, aged, and sharp enough to cut through the blandest stew. You take a bite, and the saltiness hits you like a punch. It's perfect. The cook finally looks up, sweat dripping from his brow. You like 'em? You nod. He grunts and goes back to work. Compliments aren't currency out here. They're just noise. But you meant it. These biscuits are the best thing you've eaten all day. Outside, the sun is starting to dip, casting long shadows across the street. Inside, the saloon glows with firelight and the smell of baking. You feel full, warm, and just a little sleepy. The biscuit sits heavy in your stomach like a promise. You're not sure what tomorrow holds, but tonight you've got carbs and comfort. You hear someone order biscuits and red-eye gravy, and your ears perk up. Red-eye gravy is made from coffee and bacon grease poured over biscuits like a dare. You watch as the cook ladles it out, dark and oily, with flecks of meat swirling like stars. The customer takes a bite and groans in pleasure. You make a mental note to try it next time. And just as you're about to stand, the cook slides one last biscuit your way. It's golden, perfect, and still steaming. You take a bite, and for a moment, everything else fades. The noise, the dust, the questionable coffee. Just biscuit. Glorious, buttery biscuit.
You're still nursing the afterglow of that last biscuit when someone slides a mug toward you. It's steaming, black as midnight, and smells like something brewed in a locomotive engine. You take a cautious sip and instantly regret it. The coffee is strong enough to punch you in the throat and steal your wallet. It's bitter, smoky, and somehow both scalding and gritty. Welcome to cowboy coffee. Out here, coffee isn't a beverage, it's a survival tool. Made by boiling grounds directly in a pot over open flame, it's often strained through a sock, a bandana, or nothing at all. You swirl your mug and spot a few floating grounds like tiny rafts in a caffeinated sea. You sip again, and this time your tongue braces for impact. It's not pleasant, but it's oddly comforting, like a slap from someone who cares. Historians still argue whether saloon coffee was ever meant to taste good. Some claim barkeeps added eggshells to reduce bitterness and clarify the brew. Others say they tossed in chicory, molasses, or even whiskey to mask the flavor. You're pretty sure this mug has none of those. It's just pure, unfiltered frontier fuel. The man next to you chuckles. That'll keep you awake for 3 days, he says, eyes twitching slightly. You believe him. The coffee feels like it's rearranging your internal organs. You take another sip anyway. It's growing on you. Or maybe you're just losing sensation. Quirky fact: some saloons offered cowboy cappuccino, which was just coffee with a splash of condensed milk and a sprinkle of cinnamon, if you were lucky. Most times it was just coffee with a splash of regret. You ask the cook if he has any milk, and he laughs. "We got whiskey," he says. You decline. You glance around and notice a few patrons dunking hardtack into their mugs. It softens the brick-like biscuit just enough to chew without losing a tooth. You try it, and the result is chewy. The coffee adds a smoky depth, and the hardtack adds texture. It's not gourmet, but it's edible. Mostly.
Someone orders cowboy coffee with a shot, and the barkeep obliges, pouring a splash of rot-gut whiskey into the mug. You watch as the customer downs it in one gulp, then slams the mug on the counter. "Breakfast," he says. You nod. That tracks. The cook brings out a fresh pot, steam rising like a signal flare. He pours a mug for himself and takes a sip, grimacing slightly. "Needs more grounds," he mutters. You're not sure how that's possible. The current brew could strip paint, but he adds another scoop anyway, stirring with a spoon that looks like it's seen battle. You ask him how long he's been making coffee, and he shrugs. "Since I was 12, he says. "Started on a cattle drive. Learned quick. Bad coffee gets you kicked off the wagon." You believe him. This coffee could start a war. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling the saloon's windows. Inside, the coffee keeps flowing. It's the bloodline of the frontier. Cheap, portable, and powerful. You sip slowly, letting the warmth spread through your chest. It's not good, but it's honest, like everything else out here. You hear someone mention Arbuckle, and your ears perk up. Arbuckle's was a popular brand of coffee in the late 1800s, shipped in colorful packages with sugar and spices included. It was considered a luxury, and some saloons advertised it proudly. You ask if this is Arbuckle's, and the cook snorts. "This is boot coffee," he says, "made with whatever didn't get stepped on." You nod. That tracks. The barkeep sets out a tray of mugs, each filled to the brim. Cowboys, miners, and gamblers grab them like lifelines. You watch as one man adds a spoonful of molasses, stirring slowly. Another drops in a lump of sugar, rare and precious. You sip yours plain, embracing the bitterness like an old friend. You ask the cook if he ever tried roasting his own beans. He laughs. "We don't roast," he says. "We scorch." You believe him. The flavor profile is somewhere between burnt toast and campfire ash. But it's growing on you, like a fungus. Someone nearby tells a story about a saloon in Deadwood that served coffee so strong it was banned during poker games. "Made folks too jittery," he says. "Cards kept flying." You laugh, imagining a room full of twitchy gamblers flinging aces like shurikens.
You finish your mug and set it down, hands slightly trembling. The coffee has done its job. You're awake, alert, and mildly terrified. The cook offers a refill, and you accept. Why not? You're already committed. As the night deepens, the saloon grows quieter. The coffee pot simmers gently, like a heartbeat. You sip slowly, savoring the warmth and the chaos. It's not elegant, but it's real. It's the taste of grit, of survival, of a world that runs on caffeine and stubbornness. And just as you're about to stand, the cook slides one last mug your way. It's hot, bitter, and perfect. You take a sip, and for a moment, everything else fades. The noise, the dust, the questionable stew. Just coffee. Glorious, punishing coffee.
You're still buzzing from the coffee when the cook slaps down a plate that smells wild. Literally. The meat is dark, stringy, and glistening with grease. You poke it with your fork, and it resists like it's got unfinished business. "Jack rabbit," the cook says, "or maybe squirrel." You nod slowly, unsure whether to be impressed or concerned. Either way, you're about to eat something that probably stared down a rattlesnake last week. Out here, meat isn't just food, it's a gamble. Saloon kitchens served whatever they could get their hands on, and that often meant game. Jackrabbit, squirrel, raccoon, possum, prairie chicken, even snake if the cook was feeling bold. You take a bite, and the flavor is earthy, gamey, and slightly metallic. It's not bad, just intense, like the meat has a story to tell, and it's not a happy one. Historians still argue whether beef was ever the dominant meat in frontier saloons. Sure, cattle drives brought plenty of cows through town, but beef was expensive, and refrigeration was a fantasy. Most saloons relied on local hunters, trappers, and desperate cowboys to supply the kitchen. That meant whatever wandered too close to town might end up on your plate. You chew slowly, trying to identify the seasoning. It's mostly salt, maybe a hint of pepper, and something smoky. The cook probably used mesquite wood, common in the Southwest. It adds a deep, almost sweet flavor to the meat, masking some of the funk. You nod appreciatively. It's not bad, just intense. Like the meat has a story to tell, and it's not a happy one. Quirky fact, some saloons served prairie oysters, which aren't oysters at all. They're bull testicles breaded and fried. You glance at your plate and hope that's not what you're eating. The cook winks. You decide not to ask. The man next to you is gnawing on a drumstick that looks suspiciously like it came from a very angry bird. Prairie chicken. Tough as boots, but good with gravy. You take his word for it. The meat on your plate is tender enough, though it's got a chew that demands respect. You sip your coffee between bites, letting the bitterness cut through the richness. Someone orders raccoon stew, and the cook grins, coming right up. You watch as he ladles out a thick brown concoction that smells like onions, garlic, and something vaguely sweet. The customer digs in with gusto, chewing like he's got something to prove. You ask how it tastes, and he shrugs. Better than squirrel, worse than possum. You nod. That tracks. You glance at the chalkboard menu again. It now reads, game plate, 20 cents. No specifics, just game. You wonder what kind of roulette you're playing with your stomach. But the cook seems confident and the crowd keeps eating. That's a good sign. Probably.
You ask the cook how he sources his meat, and he gestures toward the back door. Trappers, he says. Hunters. Sometimes folks trade meat for drinks. You imagine a cowboy walking in with a dead rabbit and walking out with a bottle of whiskey. It's a barter system that makes sense if you don't think too hard about food safety.
The cook tells you about a time someone brought in a mountain lion haunch. Tough as nails, he says, had to stew it for 2 days. You raise an eyebrow. Tasted like victory, he adds. You laugh, imagining a saloon full of cowboys bragging about eating predator meat. You take another bite of your jackrabbit, or squirrel, and let the flavors settle. It's wild, yes, but it's also honest. This isn't factory-farmed, shrink-wrapped meat. It's the kind of food that fought back. You respect that, even if your stomach's filing a formal complaint. Outside, the night deepens. Inside, the saloon glows with firelight and the smell of roasting meat. You hear someone ask for venison chops, and the cook nods. Got a few left. Venison was a prized catch, lean, flavorful, and slightly sweet. You make a mental note to try it next time. You ask the cook if he ever served bear. He chuckles. Once, he says. Meat was greasy, but folks loved it. Said it made 'em feel strong. You believe him. Bear meat has a reputation for being rich and fatty, perfect for stews and roasts. You wonder what it tasted like. Probably like danger. The man next to you finishes his plate and leans back, satisfied. Best squirrel I've had all week, he says. You nod politely, unsure how to respond. He grins. Don't knock it till you've tried possum pie. You laugh, but he's serious. You make a mental note to avoid pie for a while. And just as you're about to stand, the cook slides one last piece of meat your way. It's dark, tender, and smells like smoke and spice. You take a bite, and for a moment, everything else fades. The noise, the dust, the questionable coffee. Just meat. Wild, mysterious meat. You're still chewing on that last bite of mystery meat when the cook slides something bright and briny your way. It's a pickled egg, glossy, pale, and floating in a jar that looks like it's seen a few bar fights. You hesitate, then reach in and pluck it out. The vinegar hits your nose like a slap, and the egg itself is firm, rubbery, and oddly satisfying. Welcome to the world of pickled everything. Out here, refrigeration is a fantasy. Ice boxes are rare, and ice itself is a luxury. So saloons turn to vinegar, salt, and smoke to keep food from turning into a science experiment. Pickled eggs, onions, cucumbers, pig's feet. If it could be submerged in brine, it was fair game. You take another bite, and the tang cuts through the lingering taste of squirrel like a miracle. Historians still argue whether pickled goods were more common in saloons or general stores. Some say barkeeps kept jars on the counter to tempt drinkers into buying snacks. Others believe pickled items were part of a larger preservation culture passed down from homesteaders and immigrants. Either way, you're chewing on history, and it's crunchy. The man next to you pops a pickled onion into his mouth and grins. Keeps the scurvy away, he says. You nod. That tracks. Vinegar was prized not just for preservation, but for its supposed health benefits. It was believed to aid digestion, fight infection, and ward off bad spirits. You're not sure about the last one, but your stomach feels oddly soothed. Quirky fact: some saloons served pickled watermelon rind, sweet and sour with a hint of spice. It was a southern delicacy that made its way west with migrating families. You ask the cook if he's got any, and he shakes his head. Had some last week, he says. Traded it for a bottle of gin. You nod. Fair trade. You glance at the jar of pig's feet, floating like relics in amber. You're not brave enough to try one tonight, but the man across the room is gnawing on one like it owes him money. He catches your eye and raises it in salute. You smile politely and look away. The cook brings out a tray of pickled vegetables, carrots, cauliflower, green beans, all glistening and vibrant.
You try a few, and the crunch is satisfying. The vinegar is sharp, the salt just right. It's a welcome break from the heavy meats and gritty coffee. You feel refreshed, like your taste buds just took a bath. Someone orders vinegar pie, and you blink. The cook nods. Old recipe, he says. Sugar, flour, vinegar, and hope. You laugh, but he's serious. Vinegar pie was a Depression-era dessert that made its way west with struggling families. It's sweet, tangy, and surprisingly good. You take a bite, and the flavor is complex, like lemon pie with a twist. You're impressed. You ask the cook how long he's been pickling, and he shrugs. Since I had a cellar. Vinegar's cheap, salt's easy. Keeps the food from killing you. You nod. That tracks. Preservation wasn't just a technique, it was survival. Without it, the frontier would have been a lot hungrier. The man next to you tells a story about a saloon in Kansas that had a pickled egg eating contest. Winner got a bottle of whiskey, loser got a stomach ache. You laugh, imagining a room full of cowboys trying to out-crunch each other. He grins. I ate 12, he says. You nod slowly. How'd that go? He shrugs. Still can't look at a chicken. You sip your coffee, now lukewarm and oddly comforting. The vinegar cuts through the bitterness, and your stomach feels balanced. You reach for another pickled carrot, crunching slowly as the saloon buzzes around you. It's not glamorous, but it's real. It's the taste of ingenuity, of making do, of turning scarcity into flavor. You ask the cook if he ever tried pickling meat. He nods. Corned beef, he says. Salted, brined, boiled. Served it last winter. You make a mental note to come back in colder months. Corned beef was a luxury, often imported from back east or made in-house by ambitious cooks. It was salty, tender, and perfect with mustard. Outside, the wind howls. Inside, the saloon glows with firelight and the sharp scent of vinegar. You feel full, awake, and oddly clean. The pickled vegetables have done their job, resetting your palate, refreshing your senses, and reminding you that even in the wildest places, someone cared enough to preserve a little flavor. And just as you're about to stand, the cook slides one last pickled egg your way. It's firm, glossy, and perfect. You take a bite, and for a moment, everything else fades. The noise, the dust, the questionable stew. Just vinegar. Glorious, cleansing vinegar. The piano player's back, thumbing out a slow, dusty tune that sounds like it's been passed down through generations of cracked saloons and broken hearts. You lean into the rhythm, sipping your coffee and letting the vinegar linger on your tongue. The room feels warmer now, not just from the fire, but from the strange camaraderie that pickled food seems to inspire. A man at the end of the bar is telling a story about prairie oysters, and you brace yourself. Turns out, they're not oysters at all. They're bull testicles, breaded, fried, and served with a side of bravado. You blink. He swears by them. Tastes like chicken, he says. You're skeptical, but in a place where squirrel stew is a Tuesday special, anything's possible. The cook overhears and chuckles. We don't serve those, he says. Not unless the ranchers get rowdy. You nod, grateful. But the mention of prairie oysters reminds you of something deeper. The frontier palate wasn't just about flavor. It was about grit, about eating what was available, what was preserved, what wouldn't kill you, and sometimes what would impress your drinking buddies. You glance at the shelf behind the bar. There's a jar of pickled garlic, a tin of smoked herring, and something labeled spiced cabbage. You ask the barkeep about it. German recipe, he says. Came west with the railroad workers. You try a bite, and it's pungent, earthy, and oddly comforting. You can taste the migration in it. the journey from Europe to the plains, from hardship to adaptation. The man next to you orders a tomato beer, and you raise an eyebrow. It's exactly what it sounds like, lager mixed with tomato juice, sometimes with a dash of hot sauce. He takes a sip and sighs contentedly. Cuts the edge, he says. You try a sip, and it's not bad, like a Bloody Mary that got lost on the Oregon Trail. You ask the cook what the weirdest thing he's ever pickled is. He thinks for a moment. Cactus, he says. Prickly pear pads. Had a Mexican vaquero teach me. You're intrigued. He describes the process, scraping off the spines, slicing thin, brining with garlic and lime. Tastes like green beans with a kick, he says. You make a mental note to try it if you ever find yourself south of the border. Someone mentions leather breeches, and you perk up. It's not clothing, it's a method of drying green beans by stringing them up like laundry and letting them cure in the sun. Later, they're boiled with bacon and onions. You've never tasted them, but the name alone feels like folklore. You imagine a porch in Appalachia, beans swaying in the breeze, stories drifting with the smoke. The cook brings out a small dish of pickled peaches. You blink. Dessert, he says. Sweet, spicy, and a little sad. You take a bite, and it's all of those things. The cinnamon hits first, then the vinegar, then the soft flesh of the peach. It's like biting into a memory, something warm and distant, like a letter from home. You ask if he ever pickled anything just for the smell. He nods. Onions and cloves, he says. Used to keep the saloon from smelling like wet boots. You laugh, but it makes sense. Preservation wasn't just about taste, it was about survival, sanitation, and sometimes scent control. The piano player shifts to a livelier tune, and someone starts clapping. The saloon feels alive now, like the pickled food has sparked something primal. You finish your coffee, crunch one last pickled green bean, and stand. The cook nods. Come back tomorrow. Might have pickled corn. You smile. I'll bring a jar. Outside, the wind has settled. The stars are sharp, the air clean. You walk down the dusty road, stomach full, senses tingling. You've tasted the frontier. Not just its food, but its resilience, its creativity, its stubborn refusal to go bland. And tomorrow, you'll taste it again. You return the next evening, boots dusted, appetite sharpened by memory. The saloon's glow spills onto the street like a promise, and inside, the same cook is behind the counter, this time with the new jar in hand. Pickled corn, he says, grinning, sweet, sour, and stubborn. You take a seat, ready to taste whatever the frontier has fermented today. The corn is golden, sliced off the cob and swimming in a brine of cider vinegar, sugar, mustard seed, and a whisper of chili. You take a bite, and it's bright, like summer bottled and aged. The sweetness hits first, then the tang, then a slow burn that lingers just long enough to make you smile. It's not just food, it's memory preserved. The cook tells you it's a recipe from a Tennessee widow who ran a boarding house for railroad men. She pickled everything, he says. Corn, peaches, even biscuits once. You blink. Did it work? He shrugs. They ate it. You nod. That tracks. You ask if anyone ever pickled coffee. He laughs. Not yet, he says, but I've soaked beans in whiskey. You raise an eyebrow. For flavor? He grins. For survival. You make a mental note to try it next winter. A man at the far table is chewing on something dark and leathery. You ask what it is. Pickled beef tongue, he says. You hesitate. He offers a slice. You try it. It's tender, salty,
and surprisingly rich. You nod. Not bad. He smiles. Tastes like history. The cook brings out a jar of pickled pumpkin. You blink. Fall special, he says, with cinnamon and clove. You take a bite, and it's like Halloween in a jar. Sweet, earthy, and oddly nostalgic. You remember something your grandmother used to make, and for a moment, the saloon fades into memory. Someone orders Haymaker's Punch, and the barkeep nods. Switchel, he says. Vinegar, ginger, molasses, water. You try a glass, and it's refreshing, like lemonade with a backbone. It was the Gatorade of the 1800s, served to farmers and field hands. You sip slowly, feeling the ginger warm your throat. The cook tells you about chow chow, a southern relish made from pickled cabbage, peppers, and green tomatoes. Good on beans, he says, or biscuits. You try a spoonful, and it's tangy, crunchy, and alive. You imagine it on a plate next to fried catfish and cornbread. You're sold. You ask if anyone ever pickled fruit with meat. He nods. Pork and apples, he says. Brined together, then roasted. You raise an eyebrow. Was it good? He shrugs. Kept the wolves away. You laugh. That tracks. The piano player shifts to a slow waltz, and the room softens. You sip your switchel, crunch a pickled carrot, and feel the day unwind. The saloon isn't just a place to eat. It's a museum of flavor, a gallery of grit. Every jar tells a story. Every bite is a chapter. You ask the cook what he's pickling next. He thinks. Maybe eggs and beet juice, he says. Turns him pink. Tastes like rebellion. You nod. I'll be here. He smiles. I know. Outside, the stars are sharp again. Inside, the jars gleam like stained glass. You walk home with vinegar on your breath and history in your belly. Tomorrow, the frontier will pickle something new, and you'll be ready.
You're back again, third night in a row. The cook doesn't say a word, just slides a jar toward you with a wink. Inside, pickled okra, slender, green, and flecked with red pepper flakes. You bite in, and it snaps like a firecracker. The brine is bold, the texture crisp, and the heat slow building. You nod. That's got attitude. The cook grins. So did the woman who taught me. Turns out, she was a traveling blues singer from Mississippi who traded recipes for train fare. She said okra was like a good song, slim, spicy, and best when shared. You take another bite and feel the rhythm in your teeth. The saloon's quieter tonight. A few regulars, a couple of drifters, and the piano player humming something low and sweet. You sip your coffee, now with a splash of switchel, and let the okra settle. It's not just food anymore, it's ritual. The man next to you is eating pickled green tomatoes. You ask for a slice. It's tart, firm, and slightly sweet. My grandma used to make these, he says. Said they kept the ghosts away. You nod. That tracks. Vinegar has always had a touch of magic, preserving not just food, but memory. The cook brings out a surprise. Pickled walnuts. You blink. English recipe, he says. Black walnuts,
brined for weeks, then spiced. You try one, and it's earthy, complex, almost meaty, like biting into a forest. You're impressed. Tastes like winter, you say. He nods. That's the idea. Someone orders fire cider, and the barkeep pours a shot. It's apple cider vinegar infused with garlic, horseradish, ginger, and cayenne. You take a sip and feel it burn down your throat like a frontier sermon. Good for what ails you, the barkeep says. You believe him. The cook tells you about pickled pineapples, a rare treat, made with cloves and brown sugar. He had it once in New Orleans, said it tasted like jazz. You ask if he'll make it. He shrugs. If I find a pineapple that ain't been shot, you laugh. That tracks. You ask if anyone ever pickled bread. He pauses. Bread and butter pickles, named after the sandwiches they went on. You nod. Sweet, tangy cucumber slices that turned a plain meal into something special. You try a few and they taste like childhood, if childhood had a kick. The piano player shifts to something upbeat and the saloon stirs. You sip your fire cider, crunch a pickled okra, and feel the night stretch out like a well-worn trail. The cook leans over. Tomorrow, he says, I'm trying pickled apples with rosemary. You raise an eyebrow. For dessert? He grins. For curiosity. Outside, the moon is high and the air smells like wood smoke and vinegar. Inside, the jars gleam like secrets. You walk home slowly, stomach warm, mind buzzing. You've tasted the frontier's pantry, and it's deeper than you imagined. Every bite is a story, every jar a time capsule. And tomorrow, the story continues.
Tonight, the saloon is quieter still. The wind outside has settled into a hush, and inside, the fire crackles like it's telling secrets. You take your usual seat, and the cook doesn't even look up. He just slides a small dish your way. Pickled apple with rosemary, he says, like I promised. You take a bite. It's delicate, sweet, tart, and perfumed with piney warmth. The rosemary isn't overpowering. It lingers like a memory of winter woods. You nod slowly. That's elegant. The cook chuckles. Frontier folk had taste. They just didn't brag about it. The man next to you is sipping something dark and syrupy. You ask what it is. Blackstrap vinegar, he says. Molasses base. Good for sore throats and broken hearts. You try a sip, and it's bold, like drinking history straight from the barrel. Thick, smoky, and strangely comforting. The piano player's tune tonight is slower, more reflective. You ask the cook if he ever pickled anything just for the color. He nods. Beets, he says, turns everything pink. Eggs, onions, even your fingers. You laugh. That tracks. He brings out a jar of pickled garlic scapes, curled green shoots that look like something out of a fairy tale. You bite into one, and it's crisp, garlicky, and bright. Spring in a jar, you say. He nods. Harvested before the garlic bulbs mature. Farmers used to toss them. Now they're gold. Someone orders vinegar candy, and you blink. The cook nods. Old Appalachian recipe. Sugar, vinegar, butter, boiled till it cracks. He hands you a piece, and it's sharp, sweet, and nostalgic, like biting into a pioneer's idea of dessert. You ask if anyone ever pickled nuts. He thinks. Green almonds, he says. Persian recipe, brined with lemon and mint. You're intrigued. Ever try it? He shrugs. Once. Tasted like spring rain and regret.
You laugh. That tracks. The barkeep sets down a jar labeled Cowboy Kimchi. You raise an eyebrow. Cabbage, jalapenos, garlic, he says, fermented in a whiskey barrel. You try a bite, and it's wild, spicy, funky, and bold, like the frontier decided to flirt with Korea. You're impressed. The cook leans in. Tomorrow, he says, I'm trying pickled mushrooms with thyme. You nod. I'll be here. He smiles. I know. Outside, the stars are dim behind a veil of clouds. Inside, the jars glow like lanterns. You walk home slowly, the taste of rosemary and apple still on your tongue. The frontier isn't just surviving, it's inventing. Every jar is a rebellion against blandness, every bite a declaration. And tomorrow, the rebellion continues.
The saloon is nearly empty tonight. Just you, the cook, and the piano player, who's coaxing out a tune so slow it feels like molasses dripping from a spoon. You settle into your usual spot, and the cook slides a small jar toward you. Pickled mushrooms with thyme, he says. Earthy, like rain on pine needles. You take a bite. The mushrooms are tender, soaked in a brine of white wine vinegar, garlic, and fresh thyme. The flavor is deep, woodsy, savory, and haunting. You nod. Tastes like a forest remembering something. The cook smiles. That's the time. The barkeep is experimenting tonight. He pours you a shot of vinegar bitters, a concoction of apple cider vinegar, orange peel, clove, and gentian root. You sip it slowly, and it's sharp, medicinal, and strangely poetic. Frontier aperitif, he says, for digestion and drama. You ask the cook if anyone ever pickled flowers. He nods. Dandelions, he says, and nasturtiums. Peppery, bright, used to garnish stew or whiskey. You try a pickled nasturtium petal, and it's delicate, spicy, and floral, like spring bottled in rebellion. Someone mentions sauerkraut pie, and you blink. The cook confirms it's real. Sweet custard layered over tangy kraut. German settlers made it, he says. Used what they had. You try a slice, and it's bizarrely good. The contrast is bold, the texture creamy. You're impressed. Tastes like stubborn joy. The piano player shifts to a tune that sounds like a lullaby for ghosts. You ask the cook what he's pickling next. He thinks. Maybe watermelon rind with cinnamon, he says, or pickled pears with black pepper. You nod. I'll be here. He grins. You always are. You ask if anyone ever pickled air. He laughs. Smoke, he says. Cold smoked garlic in brine. Tastes like campfire and secrets. You make a note to try it. The frontier didn't just preserve food. It preserved feeling. The man next to you is chewing on pickled turnips, dyed pink with beet juice. You ask for a slice. It's crunchy, tangy, and slightly sweet. Lebanese recipe, he says. My grandfather used to make it. You nod. Tastes like memory. The cook brings out one last jar. Pickled cranberries. He says, holiday special. With orange zest and cloves. You take a bite, and it's tart, sweet, and festive, like a frontier Christmas in a spoon. You smile. That's a celebration. Outside, the wind has picked up again. Inside, the jars glow like old friends. You walk home slowly, the taste of thyme and cranberry lingering. The frontier isn't just surviving, it's storytelling. Every jar is a voice, every bite a verse. And tomorrow, the story will pickle something new. Tonight, the saloon feels like a chapel. The piano player's tune is reverent, slow, almost sacred. You take your seat, and the cook doesn't speak. He simply places a jar in front of you. "Pickled pears with black pepper," he says softly. "Sharp and tender, like a goodbye you didn't expect." You take a bite. The pear is soft, sweet, and spiced with a bite that lingers. It's complex, like a memory you're not sure is yours. You nod. Tastes like a letter never sent. The cook doesn't smile, but his eyes say he understands. The barkeep is quiet tonight, polishing glasses like they're relics. He pours you a shot of vinegar cordial, a blend of raspberry vinegar, honey, and bourbon. You sip slowly, and it's warm, tart, and soothing. "For the end of things," he says. You nod. That tracks. You ask the cook if anyone ever pickled silence. He thinks. "Cold lard," he says. "Rendered, cooled, stored in crocks. No flavor, just survival." You nod. That's silence. He agrees. The man next to you is chewing on pickled fennel. You ask for a slice. It's crisp, aromatic, and slightly sweet. "Tastes like a forgotten garden," you say. He nods. "My mother used to grow it. Said it kept the bad dreams out." You believe him. The cook brings out a final jar, pickled rose petals. You blink. "For morning," he says, "steeped in white wine vinegar and sugar, served with tea." You try one, and it's delicate, floral, and bittersweet, like a memory dressed in lace. The piano player shifts to a tune that sounds like dusk. You sip your cordial, crunch a fennel stalk, and feel the night settle around you. The cook leans in. "Tomorrow," he says, "I'm closing the kitchen. Just for a day." You nod. "Even vinegar needs rest." He smiles. "Exactly." Outside, the wind is still. Inside, the jars gleam like quiet prayers. You walk home slowly. The taste of pear and pepper lingers. The frontier isn't just about grit. It's about grace. Every jar is a gesture. Every bite a benediction. And tomorrow, the silence will speak. The saloon is shuttered tonight. A handwritten sign on the door reads, "Closed for pickling." You smile. Even rest here comes with brine. You walk past slowly, boots crunching on gravel, and catch a faint whiff of vinegar and thyme drifting through the cracks. The cook is inside, no doubt experimenting, quietly preserving something strange, beautiful, and forgotten. You head to the general store instead, where the clerk is sipping switchel and reading a newspaper from 3 months ago. He nods at you. Heard the saloons trying pickled pine cones? He says. You blink. For flavor? He shrugs. For mystery? You laugh. That tracks. You wander the aisles, spotting jars of pickled quail eggs, pickled green strawberries, and something labeled frontier relish. You ask what's in it. The clerk says, whatever didn't rot, plus mustard seed. You nod. That tracks. Outside, the wind picks up again. You sit on the porch, sipping vinegar cordial from a tin cup, watching the stars blink through the clouds. The frontier feels quiet tonight. Not empty, but paused, like it's waiting for the next flavor to ferment. You think about everything you've tasted: squirrel stew, pickled okra, vinegar pie, rose petals, blackstrap molasses. Each bite was a story, each jar a time machine. You realize the saloon wasn't just feeding you, it was teaching you about survival, creativity, and the strange poetry of preservation. Tomorrow, the cook will reopen, maybe with pine cones, maybe with pickled sassafras, maybe with something no one's ever dared to brine. You'll be there, fork in hand, curiosity intact. Because in a world that forgets fast, pickling is rebellion. It's memory with a lid. And you, now, are part of the recipe.
The saloon reopens with a quiet reverence. No fanfare, no music, just the soft clink of glass and the low hum of fire. You step inside, and the cook greets you with a nod. Didn't pickle pine cones, he says. Went with something stranger. He slides a jar across the counter. Pickled smoke. You raise an eyebrow. Inside the jar, garlic cloves, cold smoked over hickory, then brined in apple cider vinegar with a touch of maple. You take a bite, and it's unlike anything you've tasted. Smoky, sweet, sharp, and haunting. Tastes like a campfire remembering its childhood, you say. The cook grins. Exactly. The barkeep pours you a glass of ghost tonic, a blend of vinegar, elderflower, and moonshine. You sip slowly. It's floral, fiery, and oddly nostalgic. Made for remembering, he says. You nod. That tracks. The man next to you is eating pickled celery root. You ask for a slice. It's earthy, crisp, and slightly bitter. Tastes like honesty, you say. He nods. That's why I like it. The cook brings out a jar of pickled lemon peel with sage. He says, for clarity. You try a piece, and it's bright, herbal, and cleansing. Like a palate reset for the soul. You feel awake. Someone orders vinegar tea, and the barkeep brews it with black tea, honey, and a splash of cider vinegar. You sip it slowly, and it's soothing, like a frontier lullaby. You ask if it's medicinal. Only if you believe in it, he says. You do. The piano player returns, playing a tune that sounds like sunrise. You ask the cook what he's pickling next. He thinks. Maybe juniper berries, he says, or sassafras root, something wild. You nod. I'll be here. He smiles. You always are. Outside, the air is crisp. Inside, the jars glow like memories. You walk home slowly, the taste of smoke and sage lingering. The frontier isn't just preserving food, it's preserving feeling.
Every jar is a mood, every bite a moment. And tomorrow, the moment will ferment into something new.
The cook is waiting for you tonight. Not behind the counter, but seated at a table near the fire, a single jar in front of him. "This one's different," he says. "Not for eating, for remembering." You sit down, and he slides it toward you. Inside, pickled sassafras root, curled like old handwriting, steeped in vinegar and molasses. You unscrew the lid and inhale. It smells like autumn, like wet leaves and wood smoke, like something your great-grandfather might have carried in his coat pocket. You take a bite, and it's earthy, bittersweet, and strangely grounding. Tastes like a story that never got told, you say. The cook nods. "That's why I made it." The barkeep joins you, carrying a small bottle. "Vinegar tincture," he says. "Sassafras, clove, and regret." You sip it, and it's sharp, warm, and oddly clarifying. "For remembering what matters," he adds. You nod. That tracks. The piano player isn't playing tonight. He's writing, scribbling notes on a napkin, humming softly. You ask what he's composing. "A tune for pickled things," he says. "Something slow, something sour, something that lingers." You smile. "I'll listen." The cook brings out a final jar, pickled cedar tips. "For scent," he says, "not taste." You hold one to your nose, and it smells like winter cabins, like old books, like the kind of silence that heals. "Tastes like memory," you whisper. He nods. "Exactly." You ask if he'll ever stop pickling. He shrugs. When the stories run out, you look around the room, at the jars, the fire, the quiet, and know that won't be any time soon. Outside, the wind is gentle. Inside, the saloon feels like a library of flavor. You walk home slowly, sassafras still tingling on your tongue. The frontier isn't just preserving food. It's preserving feeling, folklore, and the quiet dignity of forgotten things. And tomorrow, the jar will hold something new, something worth remembering.
The cook is quiet tonight. He's not behind the counter, not at the fire, just standing by the window, watching the moon rise over the ridge. You join him, and he doesn't speak for a long time. Then, finally, "I pickled something I shouldn't have." You raise an eyebrow. He hands you a small jar. Inside, a single pale plum suspended in a brine of vinegar, honey, and something darker. Maybe clove, maybe memory. You take a bite, and it's overwhelming. Sweet, sour, bitter, and beautiful. "Tastes like a secret," you say. He nods. It was. He tells you the plum came from a tree planted by a woman who used to sing in the saloon. She left years ago, but the tree remained. She said plums were for promises, he says. So I pickled one, just one. You nod. That tracks. The barkeep pours you a glass of twilight tonic, vinegar, lavender, and black tea. You sip it slowly, and it tastes like endings, like the last page of a book you didn't want to finish. For closure, he says. You believe him. The piano player returns, playing a tune so soft it feels like breath. You ask what it's called. The Brine Waltz. 3 steps of memory, 2 of regret. You smile. I've danced that before. He nods. We all have. The cook brings out one last jar. Pickled thyme. Not thyme, the herb, but thyme itself, or at least the idea of it. Inside, a mix of dried apple, fennel seed, and a single watch spring. He says, it's metaphorical. You take a bite, and it tastes like nostalgia, like something you forgot you missed. You ask if he'll ever stop. He shrugs. Maybe someday, when the jars are full and the stories are quiet. You look around the room, at the shelves, the fire, the fading tune, and know that day isn't today. Outside, the moon is high. Inside, the saloon glows like a memory, refusing to fade. You walk home slowly, the taste of plum and lavender lingering. The frontier isn't just preserving food, it's preserving feeling, folklore, and the fragile beauty of things almost lost. And tomorrow, the jar will hold something even more tender.
The cook is quiet again tonight, but there's a new jar on the counter. Unlabeled, unassuming. You sit down, and he slides it toward you. No name, he says, just a feeling. Inside, pickled juniper berries, steeped with orange peel, cinnamon bark, and a single bay leaf. You take a bite, and it's sharp, resinous, and strangely comforting. Tastes like a memory trying to stay brave, you say. He nods. That's the idea. The barkeep pours you a final glass, the last brine. It's a blend of vinegar, elderberry, and rye. You sip it slowly, and it tastes like dusk, like the end of a long story told in whispers and jars. The piano player plays one last tune. No title, no lyrics, just notes that feel like footsteps fading into snow. You ask the cook what he'll pickle next. He shrugs. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. You nod. That tracks. You stand, the saloon quiet around you. The shelves are full now, jars of squirrel stew, pickled okra, vinegar pie, rose petals, sassafras, and secrets. Each one a chapter, each one a testament. Outside, the wind is still, the stars blink like old lanterns. You walk home slowly, the taste of juniper and orange lingering. The frontier isn't just a place, it's a flavor, a feeling, a story preserved in brine.
And so you leave the saloon behind, not with a full stomach, but with a full heart. Because in a world that forgets too quickly, pickling is resistance, it's remembrance. It's the quiet art of holding on. And somewhere in a jar sealed tight, your story now floats among the others, sharp, tender, and ready to be tasted again.